first, what inspired you to become an attorney, and describe your law school experience?
Uh, I was in college in the late 60s when all kinds of activity was going on. We had the Vietnam War, we had the Civil Rights Movement, we had the women's movement, all of them moving in lockstep. I was seeking a degree in mathematics, which I got my undergraduate degree in math. But my senior year, as I was filling out applications for graduate school, my great plan from the time I was a kid was to basically be a scientist, because there was this magnificent call for everybody to learn the sciences. There was tremendous investments made in getting elementary school kids to become scientists, because we had the threat of communism after Sputnik was launched. And so I took it to heart, and I wanted to be a scientist. And so that's why I ended up majoring in mathematics. But I was very active in high school and in college and student government and just leadership kinds of things. And so I was the same in college, participating in many of the things going on around us. And with the conversations with schoolmates, dorm mates, and folk like that, trying to keep up with current events. I slowly started gravitating toward the law, because it was obvious to me that you could have a greater impact on so many other things as a lawyer. It would have been great being a professor of mathematics, but you couldn't affect as broad a swath and as many people. And you couldn't do good in specific instances for people that you thought had been wronged, try to set directions for them. And so as I slowly started moving toward that, I decided to take the LSAT. Talking to many of my classmates and some of the professors about it, I took the LSAT, did okay, said maybe this is my calling. At that moment, I decided, yep, I'm going to law school. I lost interest in applying to graduate programs. I'd gotten inquiries from several in mathematics, but decided to go to law school. It was the best decision at the time that I'd ever made. Just had a tremendous experience in law school, lifelong friends, lifelong experiences, lifelong lessons. And it is, again, I think, a decision that I've not regretted at all. I've had a wonderful career in the law. And as importantly, I've really respected many other aspects of law and what you can do if you're really committed to basically the ethics and standards that being a lawyer requires. It teaches you another way how to treat people. A lot of the stuff you learn in Sunday school, but underscores it to some extent and makes fairness sort of the center focus of what you're trying to do, whether it's trying a case or you're trying to represent people in the legislature or you just participating actively in a committee in church. I think that there's so many principles come from practicing law and the lessons that we learn and the commitments that we make that they affect you all of your life, or they should.
And where did you go to law school, and what year did you graduate?
I went to Duke Law School. I graduated in 1973.
Are you still a Duke fan?
I am, very much so. I had a wonderful experience at Duke and remained involved with the university over all of these years, whether it was in law school itself, on student committees and stuff, or the Law Alumni Council, for 16 years I served as a trustee at Duke University and served as board chair of the trustees. And I've just been involved in it for the last half a century and enjoy all of it.
And so from that point, you said 1973 in Duke Law graduating. Take us from there. Can you take us through your career from there?
Oh, sure. Fortunately, at Duke at the time that I was there, was a guy named Terry Sanford, who had been the governor of North Carolina. And the year before I got to Duke, he was chosen as the president at Duke, and was a very active president, very involved with students. You'd run into him anywhere, and he made it an effort to be involved with young folk, whether it was just breakfasts at his house, various other things. And so anyhow, I left Duke and went to work with a law firm that Terry had started in Raleigh after he left the governor's mansion, Sanford, Cannon, Adams, and McCullough at the time. And I was recruited out of law school to Sanford, Cannon in '73, and I immediately went to work. Worked there as an associate for a while, and then got the urge to have my own firm. I left, and we started. I, along with two other guys that I'd known over the years, Cressy Thigpen and Ralph Stevens, started the firm Thigpen, Blue and Stevens. And I'm still working with various iterations of that firm over these many years. We started it in '76. Cressy Cressy went on to the bench but retired from the law firm. And Ralph, who was also a Methodist minister, died. And we had many different associates, other partners that came in over time. But now the firm is Blue LLP, and it's basically the continuation of that firm that we started in 1976. My two sons and my daughter-in-law practice with me for the most part, and we just do a wide range of legal practice.
So talk to us. That's a long time in Wake County practicing. Tell us about the changes to the legal landscape in Wake County and the landscape of Wake County that you've seen during your career.
The changes have been massive. First, this place grew so quickly. I've had almost all of my existence as a lawyer on Fayetteville Street in downtown Raleigh. And early on in my practice, I did a little bit of everything. I'm essentially a litigator, but did some criminal work because you had to be on the indigence list. Soon after I started practicing law, if you were a litigator, you had to be on the indigence list before there was a public defender system. And so you ended up knowing lawyers who did a wide variety of things. One day you're hanging out with the lawyers who were more involved in a criminal practice. The next day you're involved in those who did tax litigation or corporate practice. The next day you might be doing a personal injury. And so I've done a variety of different practices, which gave me an opportunity to really learn pretty much the entire Wake County bar. It was a very small bar at the time. It is huge now, as you might know. But over time, it got less personal. I mean, you knew basically on a first-name basis probably all the lawyers, and you'd run into them at some point, whether they're social events, professional events, whether they were bar meetings or bar functions and activities. I will tell you one clear thing, and it made such an impression on me that I still talk about it. There was a sense of caring for each other as lawyers. One day I got this call, and this lawyer, who has since died, called me and said, "Dan, did you forget that the time for answering your complaint that I filed was," and he gave me the date, and he said, "But as far as I'm concerned, that date won't happen until tomorrow." And so he said, that gives you time to go file it or do whatever you need to do. And I tell young lawyers about that there are ways that you can still be cordial and helpful to young lawyers especially. You don't have to just try to wait for gotcha moments. And that's part of practicing law, to extend courtesies when you can. I mean, you can't do things that are adverse to the interest of your client, but you can be courteous. You can be concerned and callful before you just take negative action in case you've missed one of the statutes at the time. But I'll tell you the other thing that it did. It reinforced in me that I would never miss another one. Those kinds of things, and you would get to talk to people about substantive matters in the law at many of the events that you would see. And again, now, many social activities among lawyers. I still remember most of the lawyers who started practicing here the same year that I did, and still see them with some regularity.
And do you think that can attribute some of that collegiality to the Bar Association? And what impact did your leadership in the Bar Association, your participation, what impact did that have on your career?
Oh, absolutely. Again, because you get to know people, and not only get to know them personally and stuff, but you get to know what their nature is, what moves them, what concerns they have. As importantly, you learn about their families, and you learn what things they are getting joy out of, and you share interest. And the Bar Association, I think, was very essential to that, especially early in my career. Going to the bar luncheons, again, sitting at different tables at different places. Who are you? What do you do? How long have you done this? How are you liking it? How can I be of help to you? Things like that. And just the active involvement of lawyers in all of the activities around Wake County, not just in the courtroom and practicing law, but volunteers out in the community doing things. I got involved in political office early in my legal career. And I would run into lawyers that I knew that I'd seen at the courthouse at all of these different things, whether it's activities around the Boys Club and trying to get it established when it was first set up in Wake County, with the Y and various other community-oriented things. There was a culture in the Sanford firm when I first got there that everybody, all of the associates, had to be involved in something other than just practicing law. You had to do that well, but you also had to think about your community, think about your neighborhood, and be involved in not-for-profit activities and events, basically enriching and helping the community. If that's not the case, be involved in political activity. Give your time in precinct work and helping people get elected in partisan as well as nonpartisan races. And so I think that you would get an opportunity to reinforce those with these regularly scheduled monthly meetings, or with the Young Lawyers Division in the Wake County Bar, playing basketball and realizing why you didn't keep playing basketball. Because, there was so much fun, the sports, the picnics, the athletic events, and the times with families. And so, again, it's making lifelong friends. And the commonality of it all was your first, I guess, loyalty to the law and learning how to do it and just following that. But as time moved along and this place got bigger and bigger, of course, some of those personal connections and relationships started dissipating in the sense that you didn't learn as many new people because they were doing other things. And as we evolved into a digital age, you don't have the opportunity for one-on-one meetings as much as you used to, where you actually looked people in the eye and made deals with them, or got commitments from them and did stuff like that. But the Wake County Bar Association, not just with respect to those social events, but the professionalism that it imparted, and now that it's moved to actually doing free ethics and doing other seminars to keep lawyers up to date on what's happening, they're invaluable. And so I think as practicing law has evolved, so has the bar. It's invaluable in what it does for lawyers, but I think especially for young lawyers. It gets them really committed to the practice. It lets them know what the outer ranges are, and offer support in so many other ways. Whether it's support with some of the mental health issues associated with practicing law, the pressure associated with it. It's just involved in people's lives, and I think it's consequential what the Bar Association, especially Wake County and 10th Judicial District the bars have done. And you cover it from what your professional obligations are through as I say, the medical issues related with it, the stress associated with practicing law, the fun and entertainment associated with the social activities that we do, and the continuous training in so many new areas and so many challenging areas. And of course, these have evolved tremendously over the last 50 years, knowing specifically how to be more expert in given areas that you might choose to practice in. But again, I can't overemphasize just the approach that the Wake County Bar Association has taken with the whole person and its effort to help lawyers who might stumble a little bit or who might get caught up with some of the pressures of life and sort of take them, and not in a punishing way, but in a way to help you move on and recover and do those various kinds of things.
And what was it that sparked your political beginnings?
Again, as much as anything, and it's something that I've done since high school, whether it was student body, same thing in college, and to a degree in law school. But most importantly, there was a political environment in my first firm. You got a former governor in there who comes around, a couple of times a month, come to talk to you and let you know what's happening, and who happened to be running for president at the time, at different times, and who ultimately became a United States senator. But there were other people in that office who were immensely political in the sense of working in political environments, not political in decision making. There's a guy who was in the legislature, Al Adams, who was a long-time Wake County bar member, a leader in the legislature, as well as a legal genius almost. Many other people in the firm, and we talked it in the office. So that ultimately what you can do is not just help other people get elected, but get elected yourself. And in seeing some of the issues as a lawyer, I sort of figured, you can heal a lot of problems one at a time and fix a lot of problems and challenges that people might have. But imagine if you can do it hundreds of thousands of people at one time. And that's what passing a law sort of presented it to me as an opportunity to be of benefit to a much wider range of people, not just one at a time, although I enjoy still getting something that my client feels is a benefit for the service that I've rendered. But in this way, you can affect a wide range of folk, and I was particularly interested in young folk, juvenile justice, and some of those issues. And so I got involved in some early campaigns, and by the time I was out of law school, 3 or 4 years, I was getting into the middle level myself. Got involved in helping Al and the folks in my office, some of them the lawyers, in the Jimmy Carter campaign. And it was addictive. Once you do it and you see what the ultimate impact can be, you start yearning for it. And so I still wanted to practice law because I enjoyed doing it. And so I looked at various possibilities of things that you could do to do public service in an elected office and still practice law. And the legislature, being a part-time, at least in name, legislature, gave me an opportunity to do just that. I went to the legislature thinking I would do it for 2 terms, 4 years, 2 2-year terms. And there's a line in Robert Frost's poem, The Road Not Taken, and say, that how you stayed on the road and kept going. And that's basically what happened with me and the legislature. But after I got there, I saw that you could impact a lot of people, you could do a lot of good, and you could achieve many of the goals that you had set out to achieve even as a lawyer. And so I stayed, and I've just consistently done it, and still enjoy representing people in that capacity as their elected representative, and I still enjoy representing people in the law. So they all mesh together and having fun at it.
And how many years total in the state legislature?
I was first elected in 1980. In 1980, I was just barely out of being a teenager, in my late 20s. And except for 3 years in the interim, I left the House of Representatives and ran for the United States Senate. So I took 3 years off after I learned the valuable lesson that it is a big state. And then I went back to the legislature. So since 1980, all the years collectively, about 40 years. Yeah.
And what would you say, and this can be from your political career or your legal career or both together, well, what would you say is your proudest moment?
From the standpoint of being a lawyer, I was sworn in as a lawyer by a Superior Court judge named Sandy McKinnon. And Judge McKinnon was a resident Superior Court judge in Robeson County, where I grew up. But he was holding court in Wake County. And he had also been a Duke graduate. And the conversation I had with him the day that I was sworn in on, what we can do, being from Robeson County, how we can affect the law, how we can basically let folk know that there are so many other ways that you can be of service to people, is something that stuck with me. So getting sworn in as a lawyer in 1973 was one of my proudest moments as a lawyer, and getting sworn in to the legislature, rising through the leadership, serving as Speaker of the House of Representatives. Now, those were proud moments, but they still go back to the oath that I took as a new lawyer. And it sharpened what some of the obligations were, but also what some of the possibilities were. There was a bunch of folk waiting out in the courtroom. I didn't know most of them, but they sort of seemed to take in this moment with me in 1973, and I think about that often.
And what about seeing your child be sworn in, your children? Like what went through your heart then?
When I did
Seeing your son be sworn in.
Oh yeah, all of them. I told my children that as a litigator, I stayed on the go, and as a legislator, I stayed on the go. And there's no way I could have done both of those had I not lived in Wake County. Because I also went to all of their school activities, and I could do it all from downtown. I was 3 blocks. My law office was 3 blocks from my legislative office, 1 block north of the trial courts, 1 block south of the appellate courts, 2 blocks west of the federal courts. So I could do all of that, and their schools were Ligon, Enloe, and Hunter. And so within 5 minutes, I could be at any of their schools and go to their activities, their ball games, and all of that. And I did all of that. But anyhow, I told them that being a litigator is something that demands a lot of your time, and being a legislator does as well. And that they might want to think of something else to do when they grow up. And all 3 of them have 2 sons and a daughter. All 3 of them decided to go to law school. And so all 3 of them practiced law. All 3 of them became litigators. And so the lesson that I learned from that. Oh, and by the way, and I was extremely proud when all of them graduated, but as importantly, when all of them were sworn into the North Carolina State Bar. I say the lesson that I learned from it as I talk to our grandchildren. I say, yeah, this is exactly what you want to do. And so maybe they will do the opposite as my kids did. But yeah, very, very proud moments. I mean, and there's a lot of that goes on. A lot of lawyers have kids who do it. We tend to emulate our parents. And so if you've done well in whatever your chosen area is, your kids will remember that you did well and will always think that that's somewhere I can go if I want to. And so I'm very proud of that. But again, I see all of these parent-child relationships in the Wake County Bar now, and I've seen them sworn in. There were fewer of them because there were fewer lawyers when I first started practicing. But I knew the ones whose parents, for the most part, were lawyers, and realized how it had affected them and influenced them as they moved along in their career. And I just try to remind my kids. They've been doing it a long time now, but try to remind them of the various aspects of it, whether it's teaching the law, whether it's practicing it in the aggressive ways that you litigate, or whether it's just giving wise and kind advice to many clients as to the course that they ought to follow. And so those were proud moments. And in fact, other than the personal experiences for me becoming a lawyer, those were really the most rewarding, to see that they had come to a point in their lives where they had a clear path to a career. When they were sworn in, they knew the obligations and felt obliged to follow them.
And through the years, what do you think kept you grounded and balanced outside of the law?
My wife. I mean, if you want to know the honest truth, when I told you that I left the legislature to run for the Senate, and I was busy rebuilding the law practice after that, and very busy at it. And the fellow who had succeeded me in my House seat died. And so the committee approached me and asked me would I be willing to consider letting them nominate me to replace my replacement. And I thought about it a little while, and I called Edna. She was out of town, and I called her and said, I'm thinking about this. She said, well, you ought to think about it long and hard. And I decided to do it. Told her that I thought that I would do it. And so I explained to people why I did it. I said my personal psychiatrist was out of town for a day. And with her absence, I decided to go back to the legislature. But more than anything else, she's very involved in community activities and all of that, but also sort of keeps all of us centered in how we approach things, very concerned about the health of the community and how we relate to each other, and whether it's in church or whether it's the many various activities and groups that we are part of. And so for more than half a century, she's sort of been the leveling effect. When I come home yelling and screaming because of experiences in the course of the day, I got a personal therapist to sort of talk me down, and you realize why we do what we do, and you need somebody to sort of balance you sometimes when the pressures build up, whether it's trying a tough case over weeks or over months, whether it's fighting over legislation or leadership issues down in the General Assembly.
So, through your career, I haven't heard a lawyer yet who hasn't said that mentorship was important to them, be it when they were new and starting out and they needed that mentor, and then as they've progressed in their career and were reaching to those behind them. Talk about the importance of a mentor-mentee relationship in the law.
It is very crucial. That's one of the reasons that law firms are so reaffirming of that, because there is a structure for mentorship in the practice of law. But mentorship generally is very important. And we get it from so many different places. Whether it was, and I've had just exceptional mentorship as a lawyer. I mentioned in the law firm that I started practicing in. I could go down the list of people who really went out of the way and really tried to make sure that I was comfortable. But I was the only black member in the firm in the early days, and make sure that I was comfortable in all kinds of settings. But also reassuring me in the practice of law itself, decision making and things like that. And again, I can go down an extensive list of folk, and I remember them all. Ed Gaskins was one of them, who was an extremely valuable mentor in how you deal with clients and how you do cases. Al Adams, a very important one. There was George Green, who was a district court judge here and a Superior Court judge for a good while, and who had been active in the 1950s and 60s representing students over at Shaw University. He was a Shaw graduate, representing students for free who, underscored the value of helping people who couldn't afford to pay for you to help them. And also just some of the secrets of practicing. Fred Carnage, who was probably in his 80s when I first met him, but had been practicing law here since the 1930s. Had an office on Hargett Street. At one point, I think he was the only black lawyer in Wake County, one of the two or three, one of the few. And he was in my church. He was an elder in my church, Presbyterian church. And on Sundays, I'd see him, and he'd pull me aside and say, what have you learned this week about life? What have you learned about practicing law? What have you learned? And just telling you things that are helpful. But it's a continuation of the mentoring, I think, that we all get, or most of us get when we're very young. The women who were my Sunday school teachers when I was very young, my parents, my teachers, the folk who guide you and sort of show you the better way to do something and the right way to do something. And so I remember all of them. But since law is structured and you're required to sort of observe a higher standard than you are in a lot of other careers and professions, it is extremely helpful to have folks second guessing you when you make a decision, reinforcing the rightness of it or the wrongness of it. It's just critically important. The other, maybe 3 or 4 months ago, we went to a funeral of one of the lions of the Wake County Bar, Robert McMillan. And I'd run into him in the courthouse, and he would always say encouraging things when I was a very young lawyer. Saying, now you need to watch this judge. He might do this or that to you, so be careful. And getting you a pat on the back when thought you had done a good job. Again, the list goes on. It's absolutely endless. Some of the smartest people in the world who reaffirm that you've done it the very best way for it to be done. And again, if I were to just sit here all afternoon, I could list a bunch of folk who've played a role in giving me guidance and stuff. But some stick out because they did it over time and were determined to tell me how to get through the ropes and stuff.
What is it like practicing with your sons and your daughter-in-law now?
It's a lot more fun to tell somebody what to do than be told what to do. And so, and they are very involved in the practice. They too are litigators and come from various experiences. They worked with big law for a while, or with financial companies. With my daughter-in-law, she worked for Wake County Public Defender, and so learned the law from that angle. But they bring a wide variety of experiences. But I think it's unified, I hope it is, by some of the stuff that I've tried to teach them, whether in weekly meetings or whether, weekend events or some of the jokes that I tell their kids about them, that makes them more aware that folk are watching them at all times. But it is a great feeling. I mean, I can't overemphasize the significance of watching, one of your offspring succeed at what they've tried doing. And since I happen to be in law and they're in law, that's what I get great joy out of watching them succeed at. But we have conversations ongoing throughout the day, throughout the week, even the weekends, because, we do a lot of family activities. And, of course, the grandkids are always around. And constantly reminding them of some of the challenges of practicing law, but always of what the duties and obligations are.
So when you see the most recent graduating class at Duke Law and you see these new attorneys being sworn in, what goes through your heart and what do you hope for them and what advice do you have for them?
First thing that goes through your mind is, God, I used to be that young. And then the next thing is, I wonder, do they know as much as I thought I knew when I was starting out? only later to realize that you were just beginning your learning process, that you had the basic information to be a good lawyer, but it's experience and commitment that makes you a great lawyer over time. And I'm thinking about that with all of them because they're very bright students, and they will have different experiences in life. Some will be positive. Now, you will have bad experiences if you live long enough, and whether they will be equipped with the tools, especially when practicing law, that enables them to work through those downs in life. Losing a case when you think it's your fault that you lost it, although it isn't your fault. You just had bad facts or you had bad law, one or the other. And the ability to be knocked down and to get back up, you look at them and you're concerned about that, and you wonder whether we are doing enough to make sure that when the tough days come, that they can bear it and they can still be left standing at the end of the day. I worry more about them from the standpoint of the pressures that current practices have on them than I do their ability to render very good service. Because again, I think that they're very well trained in law school. Now you got all of these clinical programs in law schools to a degree unheard of when I was in law school. So you know how to do things when you get out of law school, other than writing briefs and pontificating about things. You really know how to do stuff, and so they can take those lessons. But it's the broader things that I think about. But I also think that how lucky we are to have a fresh crop every year to come along that are committed to the creed and the oath that lawyers take, and know that they're in it. They can make money. That can be important. But they're in it for reasons other than to get rich quick, and they're in it to build their clients' confidence in them because they do great service for those clients, and they're in it to make sure that a high sense of professionalism accompanies everything that they do in their relationships with other lawyers and with their clients and with people generally.
We got Robert McMillan 2 years ago.
You got him just in time.
We got him 2 years ago, and his granddaughter, Carrie, helped us with the interview and helped us get him to read the creed. And Robert, he used to have bar parties over at his house, over in the village, over in Cameron Park. And he and Al Adams, the guy that I mentioned earlier, were a street apart. I mean, and they were both hard Democratic operatives over there. Well, everybody in Cameron Park almost is. But so Robert used to have parties. And the interesting thing about it, he and his brother Archie was a real personality. Archie had served in the legislature. And so he was much more circumspect than Robert. And you'd see him in court, and he'd pull me aside and want to talk about what's happening up at the legislature and stuff. And I stayed in touch with him at that. But Robert was the reason I got to know him is that this guy named Fred Carnage and George Green, two black lawyers, said you can always trust Robert McMillan to shoot it straight with you and to have your back if it deserves to be had. And if he tells you something, he'll do it. He's an honest guy. And if you got clients that you don't want to or you can't handle, send them to Robert. And so for a long time, I called him Mr. Mac. And he liked it. And that's what I called him later on. But I used to be on a first name basis with him. He was older than my father was. But there was a bunch of lawyers who used to meet in the snack bar in the old Wake County Courthouse. And when you'd get through trying a case in district court, everybody would gather around there. You didn't have time to do it if you were in Superior Court. And you'd gather around, and they would talk about, Blue, you didn't know about this. You could have got this on this witness and all of that. And it was teaching without them knowing that they were really teaching.
because a lot of it was in jest and stuff. But McMillan Robert was a steady in so many ways. But he had a party at his house that I was describing and we went to. And I got there the same time that George Green, who was then a district court judge. I mentioned George because the News and Observer spent half of his career chasing him. He was a district court judge, and he had very good friends in the bar, and he was one of the few black lawyers in Wake County, but had all of these close relationships, and he would do favors, not for the lawyers but for the clients, because he sort of had the attitude, you're not really a bad guy, so why am I going to mess you up? This was before all of the deferral programs and all of those things. And he got very popular and started getting votes when he ran for judge that nobody thought that he could get. I mean, he would have strange folk who would just sing his praise. And the newspaper would then had the Raleigh Times would come after him when he would give people a PJC, something like that, for some of the offenses that they would commit. And George said, "Don't worry about them. These people are going to take care of them." George and I ended up at Robert's house. And we were coming down the street, and Robert hollered out, "Hey, they're my two favorite colored boys." And I looked at George and I said, "Robert McMillan is the only person that I would take that from because I know he means it." And he said, "Yeah, one's blue and one's green." And you have to have a backdrop of it because that was when George grew up, not so much when I grew up, but when George grew up, that was the phrase used to describe black people. Mm-hmm. But it had fallen out of favor in the 50s, and certainly by the 60s. And so your first impression would be, "Hey, wait a minute, you're not." But only Robert could say that in a way that would endear him to you rather than want to knock him side the head. And he meant it that way. I mean, there was never a doubt that he was just and blue and green, just playing because there was another black lawyer in town named Brown, George Brown. So you had all of these, and he was just being hilarious. But no, I went to his funeral, and it was a wonderful. Well, if funerals can be wonderful. It was a great celebration of his life, and I watched his grandkids as they were giving tribute to him. And they did a tremendous job.
I got one more question.
Okay.
So this is the centennial, 100 years for WCVA. In 20 years, for the 120th, who are we interviewing then? Who do you...
Oh, you'll interview... You probably ought to interview the attorney generals who have been here because all of them pretty much made Wake County home after they, especially, even Bob Morgan when he came back from the Senate. They can give you a different perspective because they practice law in Wake County, and most of them probably became members of the Wake County Bar. At least the older ones did, and since the last three governors have taken that path, it'd be interesting talking to some of them in 20 years. They'll tell you what was effective and what wasn't. I think that you will talk to more lawyer businessmen because there is a heavy number of them going into business. They practice law for a little while and then go into business. Far more frequent than when I came. For somebody got an MBA and a JD, it was a rarity at the time. Now it's common, and they come practice for a few years, figure out what business they want to go in, and go run one for somebody. You'd probably talk to somebody who's doing some of the major business stuff during that time, and I would talk to somebody who's spent a career in the family and juvenile courts of this place to tell you whether and how they've changed. There was a judge named George Basin who was an extraordinary guy. He probably died. He was one of the first district court judges because they didn't create the district court until 1968. And he was in the crop of the first district court judges, and he chose to become an expert in juvenile law and became the foremost authority in North Carolina. When I got to the General Assembly in the 80s, he was sort of training judges across the state how to focus on what's happening with juveniles, what's happening in juvenile court. Because at the time that he had gotten into it, he was still sending kids to reformatories for skipping school. Yeah, I mean, you had truant officers who trolled around town all day long seeing who was not in school. And if you had missed a certain amount, they actually sent you off to a training school, a residential penal place. And George was, was leading the edge on the least restrictive punishment for juveniles, and appreciated that 11, 12-year-olds don't have brains that are fully developed and make stupid decisions, and looked at it more in the salvaging of these kids than punishing them. And so we will see how we've evolved with this system that's what our juvenile justice system in a meaningful way is maybe the way we do it now. Specialist in court, maybe 50 years old. Just see how we've aged and how we've dealt with it. So that means you've probably interviewed a lot of judges, but some who've specialized in these areas that would really drive us. A couple of family law judges. And you notice I'm not saying those who do the multi-million-dollar litigation and stuff. That's going to get taken care of anyhow. You're going to have great lawyers representing them. You're going to have the ability to pay them great salaries or great fees. But I think ultimately it's the wheels and stuff of how we are as a society that is determined in those two, the family law court and the juvenile court, more so than any others. So you want names. I wouldn't venture to give you names.
You don't have to. Some people did, some people don't. It's totally up to you.
Well, I could tell you names of young lawyers who are really making a difference. They're very, well, let me not do that. I'd start bragging again. But guys who've really made tremendous strides over the last 10 or 15 years as I've watched them. I mean, some very good lawyers who know how to fight it out in the courtroom and know how to be friends when you get through fighting it out in the courtroom.
That's what everybody said.
Yep.
But fight it out, and everybody's collegial after.
Yeah.